artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and reference sheets are all available on my Patreon. Well, hello there guys and girls, I hope you're all doing well. My name's Mikey. Welcome back to my room. It's time for another tutorial. And let's take a look today at those female anime characters that have that visually pleasing fan service look, but with that over-exaggerated body type. They're kind of thick and curving all over, but unlike the anime mum look or the mum I'd like to friendship body type, which we've covered in a tutorial you can get over here, these ladies instead are still fit and physically tight round the middle. They're going to have muscle definition maybe in the abs and shoulders, but all the generous areas, the thick thighs and hips and very generous chests, are still actually full of curves and squish. So these might be those OP kind of boisterous female warrior types that jump into anime and mangas. And really that kind of fan servicey look for those big powerful ladies is just one of the many different character body types that we're kind of running our way through on the channel. So I'm just going to give us an example that really accentuates these curves and forms, and I'll explain kind of what I'm up to with the basic shapes to put them together. We'll do a kind of front, back and side so that you guys can kind of have a character sheet template to use at home. And because I'm often doing the front of a standing character and then time-lapsing the rest, let's start with the side of a character this time. I'll talk my way through it and then we can dive on. I'm just using cheap printed paper, super cheap disposable mechanical pencil for those of you at home. And hopefully now that I'm recording my tutorials in 2K, everything is nice and crisp for you guys to check out as well. So starting up near the top of the page, I'm just giving myself a circle for the head of a character. I'm going to work relatively firmly. This would normally be a very light sketch line, but I want you guys to see it nice and crisply. And I'm just going to give it a tiny bit of tilt by indicating the center line that runs down here is at a tiny bit of an angle. Now, when it comes to taller or adult curvy sensual ladies, you might want to make them 7 or even 8 head heights tall in terms of their body to head ratio to make them really statuesque. When you're really pushing this style, you can start from about 8 head heights, and depending on what you want to achieve visually, you might even go nuts. You might go as high as 10, maybe even 11, although 11's a bit too much for the way I tend to design things. That's not human proportions, but in terms of anime, it gives you a very strong style. So all I did there is just add a little bit down to curve in off the side of either side of his head. But what I'm getting at is that I might eyeball this around about 8 head heights, but after I've done the body, I might come back and make this head even smaller to really push that feeling. So, curving anime characters. With the spine, we tend to just go back a little bit into the shoulders. I'm going to have this person facing right. And then if we're kind of popping back in here, the curve of the spine along the upper part is going to sweep like this so that the chest is popping out and tilting forward. And that sweep of the spine curve, I'm going to bring it all the way back so that the rear end is also popping as well. This is going to really push all my curving lines. And I'm going to imagine that although we're side on, we're going to get a tiny bit across the shoulder line so we can look a little bit over the front of the character. We'll get the leg up, so we're going to really squeeze some thigh meat together and then come down with a nice pointy leg here. And I'm trying to give this pose a bit of dynamic energy because moving these limbs around instead of standing up straight is really going to push all of these curves, and that's the key. Meet those thick curves against those thinner areas, and that contrast is really going to pop together, hopefully. So I'm having a really quick look at this leg line here, and I can see already, just by roughly guesstimating, that this is very much longer than the rest of the torso plus the head. That's great, that's just going to really accentuate that, but I'm also going to have them sort of on their tippy toes a little bit or wearing heels. And the ellipse that I like to drop down, I'm actually just going to keep that a little bit thinner because we're looking sideways on this time. So allow me just to pop around about here with something very vague. And these are just our guides. We're going to build our form and our structure on top of this in just a moment. And then the bucket hips area, I'm going to be very generous. With these character designs, the shoulders are actually probably going to be much thinner than the hips. They're still going to pop out an absolute ton by comparison. If we make the shoulder line quite wide and quite thick and heavy and almost equal to the hips, instead of having these fan servicey, super curvy, exaggerated ladies, you're going to end up with a bit more of a muscular, bodybuilding, hulking body type. All these body types are perfectly fine, but just be aware of what kind of visual language you're trying to pop through with your character. So these hips there, pretty much side on. I'm going to give myself a little working sphere, a little joint in the middle of the torso, so to speak, to just help me understand what I'm kind of doing around here. But a lot of this is going to be the outside meat of the thigh as well. And then what I'm going to do with this point in mind is I'm just going to say, okay, let's just get our leg joints just over there, ready to go. I might give myself a nice, relatively generous shoulder circle just over here. Maybe there's one just peeking over the other side of the chest there. And I've got a line just below that shoulder level to give me an idea of where the boobs might just kind of be popping right out and forward. We're going to get really kind of generous with that. But I'm going to have one leg squeezed up as well. So if I take a look at this overall leg length, we've been doing a lot of leg tutorials recently. Again, there's probably some kind of pop-up right now on the YouTube window. And thank you very much for following along, guys, at youtube.com/MikeyMegaMega. Click like, click subscribe. It really helps out. Get all those tutorials. Just getting that in. But basically, if we have a look at this length here, I've gone halfway so that the lower part of the leg and the foot is going to be kind of one part of this. I'm going to put in a really quick, simple triangle shape, just a super loose guide to help me with what I want to be doing later. And what I want to do later is probably tilt that down and everything. And now that I know what this kind of leg length is going on here, I'm going to do a similar thing here. So this kind of is all part of the same radius of some kind of arc. Let's go over here. Let's get that other one in. I'm going to just have this a little bit more down like that, because I'm going to really just kind of get some angle on here. And the other part of the leg, about say long, is going to come right back over here like so. I'm going to give myself another triangle just popping off there. So we're going to be using these very generous curves and shapes. Where are we going to be putting them? Well, now that I've got that just basic little frame, our little line character in place to guide us, I'm going to pop up here and I'm just going to get that neck in. These aren't the super hulking characters. So these slim, bustier, cute but super curvy ladies are still going to be very effeminate in all these other areas. Their visual body language design is specifically designed to trigger whatever part of our lizard brains look for in a mate, basically. So let's go down here, just like that. The front line is going to be just off of the far edge, just because we're still curving in just a little bit. And I'm going to imagine that this rib cage is coming down here and then popping up around about there and then curving out and down about so. And also there's going to be the lateral muscles and so on at the back, just joining up that shoulder, just curving that line in. And what I'm looking for is some really good contrasting curves. I'm going to come right down here, really pop that down the body here so that I'm getting this really firm edge in. And then this is just a guide, so I'm just going to sweep in a little bit more generously down the back and what might be round there. But let's go down to the legs. This is going to be a very thick, generous bit of meaty thigh. I'm going to imagine a cylinder shape that's right up here, starting at the top of this leg joint. So don't be scared to make it eat into the hip. And I'm going to have it just bulge really thickly here. And as we go towards the knee, it's suddenly going to start dropping down just like so. And then it's actually going to just invert a little bit for a flat section. And this is going to be all part of the knee joint in here. This also from the other under edge is going to be a little bit flatter. I'm going to squeeze that a little bit somewhere around about here. I'm just going to imagine that that stops there. And usually when we have this leg, I'm going to come out in a line here. Imagine the knee joint is right up here. When a leg is bent all the way back in on itself, this whole thing kind of squeezes and pulls a little bit. So the knee area is going to be a little bit longer as we kind of look down here, which I'm going to just express with a relatively straight edge somewhere around about here. And then in a similar way, I'm going to imagine, okay, here's our ankle joint, maybe here. Let's go in and stay very thin and slim around the ankles. We're also going to be very thin and slim around the wrists, still get that effeminate curve in. And then this now might just bring up into that kind of teardrop shape that comes off the knee, but I'm just kind of working in the other direction just to squeeze these in. Here's our shin bone line somewhere like so, before all the meat of that leg comes up there and then pops into the knee there. And in terms of this edge, as we come in, it's going to squeeze a little bit. So all this flesh around about this part might pop up here and then squeeze back down and in as everything's getting squished together around that joint. So if I just pop another little section here to just show what's going on there, this knee joint is still that kind of main circle, but it's getting squeezed out. We're going to do a tutorial very specifically on kneeling and bent legs in the future, so don't worry too much, but we've got a couple tutorials specifically about how to draw simple legs or cute anime legs as well, already done in the playlist. Okay, so if I'm relatively happy with that, I'm gonna not have it quite as exaggerated down here. I'm just gonna erase that little line there so it doesn't confuse me and bring down that bum curve. Now a bum is like a golden ratio. We start off with a long curve, but then we start to tighten that in and bring that curve in a little sharper towards the tuck in the bottom. And then as it meets into this section here, I'm just gonna get it a second little bit of bulge, just so we've got this separate part of the body flesh popping off of there. And then right up here, I'm going to tuck the meat of that leg into the hip flexor a little bit there. And there's the side of our whole hip situation around about there. Then as for the foot, well, I'm going to just sweep up and imagine our heel. We're going to have some actual heels on this character. So here's our ankle, here's our heel. And I'm actually just going to sweep down off this triangle for this example, just like so, a little inverted concave curve like that. And then I'm just going to sweep a point of some part there, just like this, still working against that triangle before sweeping back up into the leg. Okay, so similar thing, let's get that other super meaty curvy leg in place as well. This nice thick shape is one we're going to repeat, where I'm going to be stopping down at the knee here. I'm going to be coming in from that bum's edge just a little bit. I'm not going to start from the outside edge of a curve. Probably going to start from somewhere around about here and just feed that in. It's going to come down relatively straight before curving in towards the knee joint area there. Normally we'd be going relatively straight down the back with a lot of these designs, but this is extra thick. So everything is curving and these more oval shapes are popping back into play against all these harder edges. And then certainly nice and thick and confident over the front quadriceps and muscles of the leg as we come in there. And I'm just going to follow this line into the knee zone just a little bit, just because we know it's going to kind of pop off the hinge of the knee there. So this is kind of just coming out from behind. And then on this side, we also know that the back of the shin is going to sweep out the calf muscles from this knee area as well. I'm going to start with the front. Let's just almost slightly concavely sweep a line down here. And then from here, let's do the old get that meat in. Nice and further up the top is where we're wide. And then don't be hesitant to slim right down relatively quickly to really give that contrast of thick and thin. Really wide around the hips, super wide. And again, really curvy elsewhere. I'm relatively happy with that length. Again, just working by eye, but you can really measure out the proportions of the body if you want to, as you make your own way through. And then I'm just going to get that ankle joint in. This kind of triangle is our little guide, but again, we've got these heels, so I'm going to pull right back to round about here, get that coming in something like so. And then after that little flat part of the heel, I'm going to drop down round about there. And this part that's coming over the front of the shin, we make our way somewhere down here like so, is going to continue down. And then we're just going to sweep with curves coming up the other way, just to accentuate this kind of shape of a shoe of a heel. And again, we can actually pop the heel somewhere off the back like so. The reason why, and I'm sure most of you know this, but the reason why heels are quite good for your alluring character design is that it raises the back of the foot, wearing heels I should say, which then contracts the muscle of the calf, and it just even further pushes that relationship of curves. It makes your leg look a little bit curvier, a little bit more juicy. Lovely stuff. Okay, so we've come down that leg. Let's just double check what's going on here before we add some arms. I wanted to get the legs out the way so that the real mass and thickness of the character was popping away for us immediately, so that we know what's kind of going on with the feeling of this. As far as the top's concerned, well, if I bring this chest edge just in, something like so, and then I'm going to sweep this down, and then I'm just going to pull this line across and in, and I'm going to let that actually be kind of where we've got our belly button area, just somewhere up there. So this line's kind of sweeping down, but it's sort of organically melding with where the abdominal wall is. We're not picking out too many details for this particular example. Then I'm just going to bring out some of that other edge so we can get down to the hips. And also we might just have a little bit of the underside of the ribs as they're kind of going forward and off there. Other than that, we've got some kind of lats down the side. We don't need to put them in because we're not going to see them defined. The main point is this area right across here. My goodness, that's quite thin. Hashtag where are her organs? Well, here's the other thing that you always get on comments with busty anime girls. Blah, blah, blah. Well, she must have back trouble. Ah, ha, ha, ha. Yes. And that's because we're going to be super generous in the boobs. Now, I imagine with a lot of good boobage is that we're going to start and imagine a flow or a curve coming down from the back of the spine, right in the top of the shoulders. And that's just going to help me understand my curving area. I'm going to imagine that this boob is mapped to the surface of this chest around about here. And I'm going to let this just sweep right down and out. And I'm going to have this kind of teardrop shape. And remember, a lot of boobs might not stick out as far as they do look wide from front on. So we don't need to go too wildly forward to have some really generous assets. But I'm going to curve this teardrop back. And I'm going to imagine I'm also bringing that up to around about this shoulder line. But I'm going to let that curve be relatively smooth and flat until it goes below the shoulder level. And then I'm starting to sweep out. Here we go. And you can always make this a little bit larger, a little bit smaller. But we're going with that very generous design type today. Now, these boobs are, for the sake of this design, being held up in some kind of sports bra or outfit. There's a whole different mechanic to boobs that are going to be just loose and relaxed, and other design styles. We're going to cover all of that in a different tutorial. And let's just think about where I'm going to put this arm. I'm just going to start here from the shoulder joint. The length of it's going to be the length of the lowest rib. So I'm just going to pop back here for now. Give myself a nice sharp angle that can kind of pop out and in. I'll just have the hand resting down here. We'll keep that super vague for the moment. I'll fill that in just a moment. And I'm just going to give myself a arm shape where we're a little bit thicker up by the joint for the forearm. This is where we've still got all the muscles before they just reach and pull into all the tendons of the arm. Kind of flex everything around. Imagine a bit of a circle in there. And then let's just get another line to bring that all together up here. A little bit thicker up by the triceps where it goes into the shoulder. And then let's just give that a little dimension. Just like so. And I'm just going to make sure I can sweep in and just give that a bit of outline. I'm going to drop into some time lapse so that we can actually really tidy up what I'm drawing right here. But also so that you guys do have that character sheet. I'll give you the front and back. Although, oh no, I have no idea what I'm going to do about these leg poses. I'll work it out, don't worry. And if you want a copy of this character sheet that we're working on right now, along with a copy of the images from all the tutorials I've done, you can grab all of them for just $1 on Patreon. That's why I'm able to make free drawing tutorials here. That's how I like it. I want you guys to give drawing a go. Jump in, get some paper and pencil. If you ever want to help me out, go check out Patreon and otherwise subscribe. I'll leave the other hand slightly off in the background somewhere, only because we're going to really enjoy this silhouette and this profile. I've got some really strong curving shapes popping in, swinging out, curving and popping, and then it's contrasted by these firm, strong lines, along with these squishy curves popping into like these harder parts of the knee. So I'm not going to have a hand on the other side. Well, we will, but it's kind of hidden. And that way I get to just really accentuate how we're coming up the body, and then all of a sudden, bang, out comes the chest. So let me just sweep down there. With another bit of boob right around here. Or it comes back in. I might be able to make this a little bit lower depending on our viewpoint. So just to clarify, this boob, because it's got quite a lot of mass, might just sweep round into the body. But if we imagine the main mass area here, and then the rest of it as it reaches up and fills into the rest of the body, well, a lot of that is going to be going up into that shoulder line there as well. So let's come around here, just get that right on that edge, pop around there a bit more confidently. I'm working against the natural curve of my hand here. Get that tummy in, and then I might just push around a few different lines or just squish up and move out a few bits. But that is essentially how we're going to be framing our character. Very generous, very curvy, there's a lot going on. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to just jump into a little bit of time lapse, get the rest of them down, and I'll see you guys right at the end. Hey there guys, and welcome back. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea of what you can be up to if you're much more exaggerated curvy body types for the slightly more fan servicey characters in your own anime and manga design. Mixing up as many different body types and ethnicities as possible is only going to give you a wider and more dynamic roster in terms of the things that you might be making at home. So what really accentuates and pushes for curves is just getting these poses as well that allow me to have an extra curvy spine, so that you get those sort of memes of people saying she's got a broken back, extra generous chest against these very thin hips. Where are her organs? And when we've got these really thick thighs, all the extra curvy areas are still fat instead of necessarily very defined muscles, so that it really feels like it's got that squish. So by just bringing up these shapes, it allows us to play around with these profiles where we've got all these different curving edges popping out and coming against different line work. Also, when it comes to just doing a 3/4 on reverse view, I realized as I was working, that's a direction that I've not really drawn a lady from or an angle from that often. So we did kind of struggle our way through. I was eyeballing our measurements across from here, so we could always just nudge this head a little bit more or just nudge a few things. In terms of the weight, it might even be worth just bringing this leg a little bit further across. But just by eyeballing the key areas, here's my shoulder line up here, here's my hip line right across there, and I know that this knee's over here, so I'm bringing that out and just tucking the foot up. It does allow you just to kind of use that as a way of kind of mapping and locating those points and building those building blocks afterwards. I know what's going on with the hips, I know where this leg is, I know where the knee's going to be in terms of height, let's bring it out, and then I'm just collapsing these shapes. These are still those big, thick cylinders that get a little bit thinner towards the knee, and I'm just really drawing them from a much more foreshortened point of view. And that allows us to build our character on top and just get in those firmer lines to get those curves. So guys, thank you very much for watching along. As mentioned earlier, if you want a copy of this so that you can use this maybe for your own character sheets or your own designs to pop on top of, you can grab all of my tutorial reference sheets for $1 on Patreon, links of course below. And a great big shout out and thank you to all my delicious patrons whose beautiful names you've been seeing scrolling on screen. So don't forget guys, we've got to do all sorts of things for our tutorials. We need to get away from body types and start working on clothing, folds, materials, specific poses, all sorts of things. Comment and let me know which one you want to see first. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.